Thank you so much, Florian. Thank you so much, Steffi. And before we begin the conversation with Yinka, I just wanted to again say how important it is that we celebrate Steffi on the occasion of the 20th anniversary. Steffi Czerny, a big round of applause. And actually...
Not Steffi Czerny, the DLD team.
And of course, the DLD Dream Team. A big round of applause to the DLD Dream Team. And as Steffi said, Yinka, the conversation began at Zeitgeist, and we actually discussed there about your beginnings. And I thought it would be interesting that you tell us a little bit here about how it all began, because you always wanted to become a designer since very early on. You then studied furniture and product design, and actually completed a project called Our Chair, and that was connected to Martino Campo, a friend of ours, a designer in London. And you told me that already then it became clear to you that it's really all about storytelling. So I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about your beginnings in design and the importance, of storytelling in design and just in life in general.
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Florian and Steph for having me. This is my first time in Munich. So first of all, it's cold. It feels like I feel at home. I feel like I'm in London. And also thanks to, to Hans, who did the introduction last year in Google Zeitgeist. So I feel like it's a full 360, and I'm so honored to be here. So thank you once again. So my journey started around sort of 15 years ago. My background is furniture design and product design. I grew up in London, 2 Nigerian parents, and I'm a storyteller. I started off sort of collecting chairs. I was collecting chairs for like 10 years in skips, charity stores, second-hand shops, and I would just collect these objects in my house, and I would reimagine them using folklore, Nigerian parables. So these chairs became sculptures, and all these chairs had narratives in them. And that's kind of how my journey started in design, was through chairs.
And you then very soon went into public space. Your design is very much, Gibbon and George once said, art for all. We can say you do design for all. Yep. It's for everyone, it goes to the people. The public sphere is important. And you realized kind of that the public sphere has lots of rules, particularly where you grew up. You felt there were lots of rules. And, it said no to games, it said no to writing, it said no to many things.
It did.
And you kind of wanted to actually say yes to games. You wanted to say yes to playfulness and somehow, create really these public spaces. Can you talk a little bit about that and also about, the importance of play?
Sure, yeah. So this is my estate. This is where I was raised, in a place called Marcus Estate. It's very brutalist, counter state, environment. And I remember as a kid seeing lots of signs that said no ball games, no running, lots of no's, nothing positive for kids to play and dream and engage with their environment. So for me as a young kid, I remember growing up in London, play was quite a big part of my culture, my upbringing. So I was commissioned by Lego to reimagine, a play space. And what you're looking at here, you're looking at a laundrette, which was my laundrette as a kid, that I used to go to as a kid in London where we used to wash our clothes. And this whole space was literally a Lego laundrette. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at a laundrette space that you come into the space, the vending machine actually has Lego bricks that come out of the machine. You can rebuild the laundrettes, you can play, you can run, you can build Lego bricks in the space. So for me, it's about trying to challenge the public space and democratize what play means, to different people. And I think play is such an integral part of a child's upbringing, but also for adults. Adults don't play enough, we don't play enough, we don't dream enough. So for me, it's about trying to tap into our inner child as adults to relive those childhood memories through design.
And of course, play will bring us then to the topic also we wanted to address today, which is the way you kind of engage with AI and how AI comes into your design. It's very much mixed reality because you work with very physical and with virtual dimensions, and you're working actually on a playground. But before going there, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about your beginnings with AI? Because as far as I remember, it was in 2019 that I saw for the first time your kind of experiments with AI, and that was when, in the context of Freeze in London,
Yep.
you collaborated. It was a brand collaboration with Bombay Sapphire, a campaign actually. So it's interesting in relation to this idea of, a campaign. I think it's always fascinating also in relation to what Florian said, about, I think it's interesting how art and campaigns can come together and how artists can be involved in campaigns. And, Bombay Sapphire involved you in that kind of artist-run campaign, and it's there that you kind of brought in AI. How did that begin?
Well, I work with different brands. We work from brands from like Nike to to Marks and Spencer's, a retail store in London. We work with museums and galleries. But Bombay Sapphire, I think it was around like 6 years ago. They were looking at using AI to create additional artworks. So for the first time, I always create my artworks using my sketchbook and my pen and Photoshop. But they said to me, we've got this idea of reimagining your artworks using AI. So I fed this algorithm all my images of my family heritage, all my artworks, and then it reimagined my artwork into something new. And that was the first time I sort of saw the power of AI in kind of, capturing stories and narratives and reimagining your narratives through something that you have to trust is authentic. So I was very skeptical initially when using AI, but now I'm using AI to be working with Google to design an online playground, which is all about trying to make design and play inclusive online for people around the world.
And you said that when you somehow work with design, and it's interesting, it came up in several panels here at DLD since yesterday, is the importance of memory. And when you put kind of data into your work, when you create these data sets to actually train the AI, memory plays a very important role. It's the memory of your illustrations. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of memory? And I mean, in a way, very often amnesia can also be at the core of this digital age, and it's important to protest. As Eric Hobsbawm, the late historian, always said, we need to protest against forgetting.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, these are my early works here. These are all the chairs that I used to collect 10 years ago. And all these chairs are inspired by, family memories, my mum, my dad, personal experiences of people I went to school with. Interestingly enough, there are chairs within this collection here that were about 5 of my friends I went to school with. And they've seen these chairs in public spaces, and the chair is about them, but they don't know it's about them because the narrative is so personal and private between me and the object. I try to tell narratives of stories I experience into everyday objects. And I think especially within design, there's not enough, I think anyway, there is not a lot of storytelling, personal storytelling, where you can kind of connect and have an emotion and a connection to what you're kind of experiencing, especially within design, or whether it's a pavilion or an illustration. How do you connect and invoke an emotion when you interact with an object? And the chair is something that we're all using today. We're on a stool, we're on a staircase, but chairs bring us together. And objects for me, like a chair, is a way I try and tell narratives in an object.
And last year, some of you will remember, we had here on this stage Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, who talked about their art and AI, and the exhibition is now on at the Serpentine until February in London. And Holly and Matt say that artists can really play a role in guiding the future of AI by simply getting involved. They say now is the time to experiment, and that's exactly what you're doing, and you're doing it in collaboration at the moment with Google. And I wanted to ask you, tell us about this playground, because it's basically a playground in the AI space, and you basically want to get more people involved. You wanted to be a tool for people to come together. This idea of, I kind of think it's really fascinating, the idea that art can be a tool for togetherness.
I think it can be. I mean, so the playground on the left, you can kind of see on the top left, that was the existing playground. So basically it was a playground that Embarking already existed, and I actually reimagined the playground that already was there already. It was a 100-year-old playground, so we had to, redesign it with the community. We worked with kids and families in the area to tell stories that really existed in that play space. So I think for me, most of the work that we do is not about just designing and living the design there. It's actually, how do we interact with people who live in the space? How do we respect the narratives and stories of people who live in those environments and bring them out again so they live on for 100, 200 years? So this space here, actually, what you're going to see end of January is an AI version of this on Google Arts and Culture. which we're launching end of this month. And it's the first time we're working with Google to sort of redesign a play space that is all about collaboration. So collaborative play. So you kind of come into this, online playground, which we found on the app, and you have to build your playground with people you don't know. And I think that the beauty of play spaces, especially with young children, is that when they go into a play space, I have a daughter who's 2, she will play with someone she doesn't know. And that's the magic of kids. Kids are not afraid to make friends or play or dream or make memories. But I think as adults, we sort of lose the will to connect, re-engage, make new friends or dream or make memories. So I think this play space is about trying to, make a space that is accessible for everyone, adults and kids. So it's a place where you can be in Nigeria, you can be in Germany, and you can build a playground together online through the app.
So it will be a planetary playground in a way. And you also told me that, you kind of know how children play in England, but that could be very different how they play in other countries. And so in your planetary AI playground, you can see how children play all over the world, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, I go to Nigeria at least twice a year, and the way kids will play in Nigeria is very different from how they play in London. And I always would say that there are kids in Nigeria who have never, ever used a swing or seen a seesaw. It sounds crazy, but it's true. When my mum's from in Nigeria, 8 hours from Lagos, they've never, ever used a seesaw. Such a simple design object, but the way they might play through using a tile or using an instrument or using a brick. But it's just how they use the imagination. So I think your environment forces you to be creative and play in the way that, you grew up in.
And if you think about togetherness, it's also about bringing fields together. And one thing which I wanted to ask you also about, because it's a project you did here in Germany, in Berlin, is of course your football pavilion for the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, the House of World Culture in Berlin. It's called Ballet of the Masses, about football and catharsis. I think it's interesting, because we live in a world where very often these different spheres of society don't talk enough to each other, and particularly it seems very interesting how you bring together there the sphere of art and design together with the sphere of football. Can you tell us about this pavilion and the genesis of it? Because we have an image here.
That's right, yeah. So it's called Ballet of the Masses, and I think it's called Reflection in Numbers. Within football culture, there's so much politics, there's racism, there is, the themes of sexuality and identity within football. And these are things that I've discussed every day, FIFA, Federation and whoever, is making these decisions within football. But, with this commission, we wanted to sort of highlight and look at the racism within football. And I was commissioned by the museum to create a pavilion to address some of these issues when you experience this space. But I think for me, with the work that I do, is about trying to highlight issues that are serious and uncomfortable, but try to make the work a little bit humorous and easy to kind of digest and have this conversation. So it's about trying to reflect about, as a football fan, how do we make it a safe space for football players, but also for the community and audiences when they interact and they're on the pitch.
And you create kind of vibrancy with public space. I mean, I think that's another thing which is super fascinating, thinking about the fountain you created in London at Piccadilly Circus.
Yep.
It created a very vibrant kind of positive energy at one of London's busiest spots. And I mean, Richard Sennett talks about that often, how we can actually, through public art, which is why we need artists and designers, in society, in public spaces, how we can create this sort of vibrancy of public space. We have an image here. Can you tell us about this project?
So this was actually, as a young kid, I don't know if you know Piccadilly Circus, but I spent my childhood in Piccadilly, going to Trocadero. I spent every weekend playing in the arcade. So it's such a historic and sort of monumental part of London, in my opinion. I think everyone, I'm sure, has been to Piccadilly Circus before, maybe not. But it's very busy, it's very multicultural. And I was really inspired by Anteros, the Greek god of love. I love joy, and I love community. So it was all inspired by Anteros, the god of love with the arrow, which is at the center of Piccadilly Circus. And it was about trying to sort of, project affirmation, positivity, affirmation, joy, about dreams and dreaming. And, kind of expressing love for someone you don't know in this monumental part of London. So it was kind of respecting the existing architecture and playing on the words of Anteros, of this Greek god of love. So most of the work that I do is about trying to, connect and engage with the public space and trying to make the work and make these spaces accessible for people who don't actually go to galleries or museums, and bringing art to the people for free in public spaces.
Thank you. Now, what is so magical, one of the many things which is so magical about DLD is, of course, as Steffi says, it happens here in this amazing space Florian created, and we can actually, in the breaks between the talks, see extraordinary artworks, which is very special. And on the way here, I suddenly stumbled across some prints by Ruprecht Geiger, who is a not-so-known artist outside Germany. He passed away. He was almost, I think, 100 years old or even older, lived here in Munich, and actually somebody who would be very interesting for you to look into because he worked, like you, with colors. Colors as an incredibly intense kind of personal moment. And I was just thinking about that, coming here. I was thinking about Ruprecht Geiger and you. But then, of course, you're not only using color, but you also, as we can see here, that's amazing. So we should give a big round of applause for this amazing collection and your great activity as a collector, yeah. No, I was really touched to see this Ruprecht Geiger work I haven't seen in years, on the way here. But you use not only color, but you also use words. And I think what is interesting is to talk about that a little bit because we, since the beginning, encountering the work, kind of see these extraordinary poems in a way. You're also a poet. What's the role of words and poetry in your work and in your murals? I mean, the murals are very often text-based work. You bring words to the city.
I think words for me have always been something I've always naturally been connected with. I love poetry, so poetry, writing. I love affirmation. I'm a huge believer in affirming what you want, for your life, for your career, whatever it is, and just affirming the year to be positive. I think for me, even my journey has been purely based on my affirmation. Being here has been based on affirmation. So I think my parents have always kind of encouraged us to use affirmation in our work, in our lives. And colour has come from my heritage, being Nigerian, and kind of seeing my parents move from Nigeria to London as immigrants, and seeing how cloth and fabric played a huge part in how they were able to represent where they were from, but also fabrics and colour gave them a sense of joy and hope, So that's come from my heritage of being, being Nigerian.
And talk about words, we have to talk about dreams because the title of this panel, involves dreams. Can you tell us about dreams? I think it's very important that we talk about dreams.
Well, I think being here, I think it's been something I've always dreamt about. I think everything, I try and start my year with 10 dreams, and slowly when you affirm them and you recite them, they come to pass. And I really believe in dreams and affirmation. I think for me, even when I have a dream at night and I wake up, there is some moments of there's a message in those dreams. So I really think it's important for us to write down our dreams and really kind of affirm our dreams because they will become a reality if you believe in them,
And dreams bring us to the last question I wanted to ask you, because one of the things we've been doing on all the arts panel, always in dialogue with Steffi and the DLD team since the very beginning, really, of DLD 20 years ago, is that we always ask artists, my favorite question, which is, what's their dream? What's their unrealized project? And the amazing thing is that very often when artists talked here at DLD about their dream, their unrealized project, actually they became reality because somebody in the audience, said, let's make it happen. So it's actually not, talking about unrealized projects to keep them unrealized, but to make them happen. And it's interesting, of course, also that we very often, even of very well-known artists and designers, we don't know their unrealized projects. We know the architects because they publish them, but designers and artists less. So I wanted to ask you to tell us about one or two of your favorite unrealized projects. And that can be very broad. It can be a project which is too big to be realized, or too expensive to be realized, or too time intense to be realized, or maybe also a forgotten project, in the analog sense, maybe in a locker in your studio, or digitally, somewhere in your laptop, a file. But it could also be a project which is impossible to be realized. Sia Amajani wanted to connect the Earth to the moon with a sculpture. That was impossible. That's an utopia. Or it could also be a project which was censored. I mean, very often censorship is the reason why a project is unrealized. Or, as the late Doris Lessing always told me, there is also the projects we want to do and we don't dare to do. I think many of us have such projects, and that's, Doris Lessing called those the self-censor projects. So within this broad range, can you tell us about one or two of your unrealized projects or dreams?
I think the one I'm always going to talk about is actually having a sculpture park, a Yinka Ilori sculpture park somewhere in London. I've been saying it for nearly 2 years now. Is there anyone in here who's got millions for a sculpture park? Anyone? No? Well, I'm sorry? Could start here. But that is a dream project for me, you know, having a sculpture park that's for everyone to access, to make memories, to dream. We're talking merry-go-rounds, seesaws. Imagine Luna, and you know, what you've seen in Miami. It would be a fun fair, and yeah, a place where you just dream. So it'd be a sculpture park.
Yinka, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Yinka. Big round of applause.